The first thing I noticed about the basement was that it felt deeper than it should have been. The realtor brushed it off with a laugh, saying old houses always felt strange. But when I stood at the top of the stairs and looked down, the darkness didn't stop where it should have. My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 35, recently widowed, and I bought the house in Milwaukee because it was cheap, quiet, and empty in a way that felt merciful. The listing said, finished basement, but what waited below wasn't finished at all. It was raw concrete, exposed pipes, and a cold that seeped into my bones the longer I stood there. Still, it was just a basement, I told myself, and after everything I'd survived, I wasn't afraid of empty spaces anymore. For the first month, nothing happened. I worked, slept, and slowly learned how to exist alone. I stored boxes in the basement, Christmas decorations, my late husband's clothes I couldn't bring myself to throw away. I avoided going down there at night, not because of fear, but because the stairs felt longer after dark. I counted them once, 13 steps, but sometimes walking down it felt like more. I laughed at myself and blamed grief, exhaustion, imagination. That's what you do when the world starts to tilt slightly off-center. The first real change came after my neighbor, Mr. Halvorsen, died. He was found at the bottom of his own basement stairs, neck snapped. The police called it a fall. I baked cookies, attended the funeral, came home, and that night I heard a sound from below my kitchen floor. A dull, heavy settling noise, like concrete cracking under pressure. The next morning, when I went downstairs, I froze. Where there had been a blank concrete wall behind my storage boxes, there was now a doorway, cleanly formed, perfectly rectangular, leading into a room that hadn't existed before. Inside was a small finished space, carpeted, painted a soft neutral gray. A single lamp plugged into an outlet that hadn't been there before. And in the center of the room, neatly folded on a chair, was a flannel jacket I recognized immediately. Mr. Halvorsen's, the one he always wore when he shoveled snow. My stomach turned, but my brain refused to connect the dots. I told myself it was a prank, a cruel coincidence, something explainable if I just didn't panic. I closed the door and didn't go back down for 2 days. The house didn't give me that choice again. 2 nights later, a man broke in. I woke to the sound of glass shattering and footsteps on my first floor. He was high, desperate, waving a knife, shouting incoherently. I locked myself in the bathroom and called 911, but before they arrived, he slipped on the hardwood, fell hard, and cracked his skull on the corner of the counter. He died there, bleeding onto my floor. I remember standing in the flashing red and blue lights afterward, shaking, repeating that I hadn't touched him, that I hadn't done anything wrong. They believed me. It was self-defense by circumstance. An accident. That night, the basement changed again. There were now 2 new doors. Behind the first was another furnished room, this one decorated with cheap posters and empty beer cans. A man's wallet lay open on a desk, ID still inside, the intruder. Behind the second door was something worse. A long, narrow hallway, unfinished, stretching into darkness. At the end of it, I could see another door forming, the wall bulging outward slowly, like something breathing from inside the concrete. I slammed the door shut and screamed until my throat burned. I tried to leave the next morning. Packed a bag, got in my car, turned the key, nothing. The battery was dead, even though it was new. My phone lost signal the moment I stepped onto the driveway. When I went back inside, the front door wouldn't open. Not locked, just immovable. As if the house had decided something and wasn't interested in my opinion. That's when I understood the truth I'd been avoiding. The basement wasn't reacting to death. It was feeding on it. The next death wasn't an accident. I wish I could say I didn't know what was happening, that I was confused or manipulated, but the truth is uglier. A delivery driver came to my door that afternoon. Young, friendly. I invited him inside because I was shaking and crying, and he looked concerned. I don't remember deciding to push him down the stairs. I remember the sound his body made when it hit the bottom. I remember standing over him while he gasped, watching the life leave his eyes, feeling something deep in the house settle into place like a satisfied sigh. That night, the basement grew again. New rooms appeared faster now, bigger, more detailed. Some looked like hospital rooms, others like bedrooms, offices, childhood spaces frozen in time. Each one filled with belongings, traces of the people who had died. Blood never appeared in the basement. No mess. The violence stayed upstairs. The basement was a museum. A record. A reward. It didn't stop with strangers. It escalated. The house made sure of that. It brought people to me. A friend I hadn't spoken to in years showed up unannounced, worried about me. A social worker came by after a concerned neighbor called. A police officer knocked on my door alone, late at night, asking questions that didn't make sense. Every death made the basement deeper. Every room made the stairs longer. I stopped counting after 20. The worst part wasn't the killing, it was what happened after. The rooms didn't stay empty. Sometimes, when I stood in a hallway, I could hear movement. Soft footsteps, breathing, whispers. The people whose rooms filled the basement weren't gone. They were part of it now, absorbed into the structure, aware but trapped. Their suffering stretched out endlessly, fueling the house's growth. I saw them once, reflected faintly in the polished concrete floor, faces pressed close beneath the surface, mouths open in silent screams. I tried to stop. I tried to start the house. I locked myself in my bedroom for 3 days, refusing to open the door. On the 4th night, the walls started to bleed. Not blood. Something dark and thick, seeping from the corners, dripping onto the floor in slow, deliberate patterns. The house was hurting, and it wanted me to fix it. The whispers turned into screams, the same voices begging me to stop, to end it, to kill again so the pain would ease. I broke. Of course I broke. Everyone does eventually. Now the basement is vast. A labyrinth of rooms and corridors that couldn't possibly fit beneath the house. Sometimes, I get lost down there, wandering past doors I don't remember opening, rooms that feel older than the rest, filled with people who don't belong to any recent memory. I think the house existed before me. I think it's always existed, wearing different addresses, different owners, waiting for someone broken enough to listen. I don't know how many people have died here anymore. I stopped keeping track after 50. The basement keeps perfect count for me. And now, as I write this, I hear the front door unlocking on its own. I hear footsteps approaching, drawn here by something they can't explain. The house is hungry again. And I understand finally that I was never the owner. I was just the caretaker.
They told me the facility didn't exist, and that was the first lie I believed because I needed it to be true. My name is Claire Holloway. I'm 31, a nurse from Denver, and I volunteered for a medical sleep study that promised good pay and minimal risk. I signed the forms without reading the fine print, let them draw my blood, let them strap a plastic band around my wrist with a number instead of my name. The last thing I remember before the sedation took hold was a man in a white coat smiling too widely and saying, "Don't worry, we're very good at keeping people alive here." I woke up underground. There were no windows, no clocks, no sense of day or night. Just fluorescent lights humming softly above a narrow room with white walls and a bed bolted to the floor. My arms were strapped down, and four in my vein, wires taped to my chest. I tried to move and pain bloomed everywhere at once, sharp and overwhelming, like my body was remembering injuries my mind hadn't caught up to yet. A screen on the wall lit up with my vitals, heart rate steady, oxygen perfect, healthy, alive, too alive. They came in quietly, always in pairs, always masked. They never used my name, only my number. They spoke about me like I wasn't there, discussing my reactions, my thresholds, my resilience. When I begged, when I screamed, they made notes. When I passed out, they adjusted the drip and brought me back. The first time they broke my arm, I heard the bone snap like a dry branch, felt the pain explode white-hot through my body, and then felt it fade as something cold rushed through my veins. I screamed anyway. They smiled anyway. Good response, one of them said. She's holding up well. They fixed me afterward. Perfectly. Set the bone, stabilized it, healed it faster than it should have healed. When I woke the next day, my arm was intact, wrapped in clean bandages, pain reduced to a dull ache. I almost cried with relief until I realized what that meant. They weren't trying to kill me. They were making sure they couldn't. Time stopped making sense. Days blurred together, measured only by procedures, cuts, burns, controlled infections. Oxygen deprivation timed to the second. They pushed me to the edge of death and pulled me back every time, disappointed if my vitals dipped too low, pleased when my body adapted. I heard screaming through the walls, other voices, other numbers. Sometimes the screaming stopped suddenly, and the next day, one of the masked figures would mutter about failure and wasted potential. One day they moved me. The new room was larger, colder. Glass walls on one side, like an observation theater. Beyond the glass, I saw rows of beds, each occupied. Men and women, different ages, different states of damage. Some were missing limbs. Some were covered in scars so thick their skin looked melted. All of them were breathing. All of them were alive. A woman in the bed across from mine stared at me with empty eyes, lips trembling. She whispered, "Don't let them hear you ask to die. They hate that." That's when I understood the rule. Death wasn't mercy here. Death was failure. They explained it eventually, as if that made it better. The facility was researching human endurance, the limits of pain, the breaking point of the mind. War applications. Space travel. Extreme environments, they called it. They weren't monsters, they insisted. They were pioneers. And pioneers needed data. The subjects who survived the longest were the most valuable. The ones who begged the hardest were often the strongest. I tried to kill myself anyway. I bit my tongue until blood filled my mouth, tried to choke on it. I ripped at my stitches, tore open wounds when they left me alone. It never worked. They watched constantly, cameras everywhere. The moment my vitals dipped dangerously, alarms sounded and they rushed in, saving me from myself with practiced efficiency. One of them leaned close once, his mask inches from my face, and whispered, almost kindly, "You don't get to choose when this ends." They showed us the long-term wing after 6 months. The survivors, people who had been there for years. Their bodies were wrong, reshaped by surgeries and repairs, bones reinforced, nerves dulled and sharpened in places science shouldn't reach. Some of them smiled when they saw us. Not happy smiles, conditioned ones, acceptance smiles. One man laughed hysterically when a new subject was wheeled past, screaming, "You'll get used to it. The pain becomes everything. It's beautiful." I stopped screaming after that. Not because it hurt less, but because I learned screaming gave them satisfaction. Silence unsettled them. Silence made them lean in closer, ask questions, poke harder. I learned to dissociate, to float somewhere far above my body while they worked. I counted heartbeats. I named cities in alphabetical order. Anything to survive the minutes, the hours, the procedures. Years passed. I know because my hair grew long and gray at the temples, because my reflection in the glass aged even if my body was constantly repaired. New subjects came. Fewer left. Sometimes, someone flatlined for too long and wasn't revived. Those nights were quiet, heavy. The rest of us felt it, a pressure in the air, the sense of punishment coming. The next day was always worse. I don't know why I'm writing this now. Maybe because something has changed. They brought in a new wing, deeper underground, sealed behind thick steel doors. They're excited about it, nervous. They talk about the final phase, about experiments that require subjects who can endure anything. They look at me differently now, proud, like I've earned something terrible. Yesterday, one of them took off his mask in front of me. Just for a moment, his face was calm, ordinary, almost gentle. "You've done so well," he said. "You're proof of concept. We don't need new subjects anymore. We can keep perfecting the same ones forever." I understood then. This wasn't a study with an end date. This was a system. A machine that ran on suffering, optimized to preserve its fuel, us. I felt something inside me finally crack, not my mind but my hope. Death wasn't coming, not for me. Not ever. They're coming for me now, wheeling me toward the new wing. I can hear the others screaming as they pass, begging, bargaining, praying. I don't scream anymore. I save my breath. Pain is constant, but fear has evolved into something colder, heavier. If you ever hear about a place like this, a facility no one can find, a program that promises survival at all costs, understand this. Sometimes staying alive is the worst thing they can do to you. And somewhere beneath your feet, far underground, there are people like me who would give anything at all to die.
The first thing I noticed when I arrived in Hollow Creek was the smell. Not rot exactly, something sweeter, heavier, like old flowers left too long in water. I told myself it was manure or stagnant river mud. Rural towns always had smells outsiders weren't used to. My name is Claire Holloway. I'm 32, a social worker contracted by the state of Kentucky to perform wellness checks in isolated communities. Hollow Creek was one of the last dots on my list, a place with no hospital, no cemetery, and an unusually low death registration rate for a town that old. On paper, almost no one here ever died. That should have scared me more than it did. The Turner family lived at the end of a dirt road that didn't show up on GPS. 3 generations under one sagging farmhouse, surrounded by cornfields and dense woods. I was there because the school counselor reported that one of the Turner children, a girl named Maybelline, kept writing essays about talking to her dead grandmother every night. The counselor assumed grief or imagination. The state wanted confirmation. When I knocked, the door opened immediately, like they'd been waiting. Mrs. Turner smiled at me, too wide. "Too many teeth showing. You must be Claire," she said. "We heard you were coming." That was strange. I hadn't announced my visit. Inside, the house felt crowded. Not with people, there were only 6 living Turners I could see, but with presence. The air was thick, unmoving. Family photos lined the walls, dozens of them, stretching back over a century. What unsettled me wasn't their age. It was that the same faces appeared again and again, unchanged. A man with a broken nose and narrow eyes showed up in photographs dated 1912, 1957, and 1999. A woman with long black hair and a scar on her chin appeared as a bride in 3 different decades. "Big family," I said carefully. Mrs. Turner nodded. "We don't lose our own." I met the rest of them at dinner. Mr. Turner, thin and stooped. Their sons, Eli and Thomas. And Maybelline, the girl from the report, who stared at me with unsettling calm. There was an empty chair at the table, with a plate already served. Meat, potatoes, gravy. For who? I asked. "For Mama," Maybelline said softly. Mrs. Turner shot her a look. "Hush now." They prayed before eating. Not to God, not to anything I recognized. The words sounded old, rhythmic, like instructions passed down rather than belief. When we finished, Mrs. Turner insisted I stay the night, said the roads weren't safe after dark. I should have refused, but my phone had no signal, my car wouldn't start, and the sun was already sinking behind the trees. That night, I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, dragging. Something wet brushed past my door. I stayed frozen in bed, heart pounding, until I heard whispering. Familiar whispering, the same cadence as the prayer. In the morning, I tried to leave. The Turners insisted on breakfast first. While they cooked, I wandered the house, looking for Maybelline. That's when I found the locked door at the end of the hall. It wasn't a basement door. It led downward, deeper than the house should allow. Cold air seeped from the cracks, carrying that same sweet smell. I unlocked it. The stairs went down far longer than expected. Concrete walls. Dim, lights strung like Christmas decorations. At the bottom was a room filled with chairs, wheelchairs, hooks in the ceiling, and bodies. They were dressed, cleaned, preserved in ways I didn't understand. Some sat upright, eyes sewn open, jaws propped with metal braces. Others were suspended, limbs gently swaying as if breathing. Tubes ran into their mouths, their chests, their skulls. Pumps hummed softly, circulating fluids that kept flesh from decaying completely. They weren't buried. They were maintained. One body turned its head when I stepped closer. I screamed. Hands grabbed me from behind. Mrs. Turner's voice was calm in my ear. "We told you not to wander." They explained everything after that, as if it were perfectly reasonable. In Hollow Creek, they believed death was weakness. Burial was surrender. The body, even after the soul faded, still held strength. Memory, guidance. The dead could advise the living if kept active, fed the right fluids, moved, listened to. "Our elders don't leave us," Mr. Turner said. "They make us strong." I demanded to know about the outsiders, the missing census workers, the delivery drivers who never returned. Mrs. Turner smiled. "Family has to grow." They showed me a newer section of the room. Bodies that didn't wear Turner faces. People whose names I recognized from missing posters. Their eyes followed me. Their mouths trembled, trying to speak around restraints. One of them was alive. Barely. That's when I understood Maybelline's essays. Her grandmother wasn't a memory. She was downstairs. Still active. Still whispering. They didn't kill witnesses right away. That would waste potential. Instead, they kept you until your body learned obedience, until you stopped fighting, until you accepted the family. They locked me in a room below the house, hooked me up to machines, fed me nutrients, made me listen to the whispers of the others, the half-dead, the long-dead, all murmuring the same words. Stay, be useful, don't weaken us. I don't know how long it's been. Days, weeks. Time blurs when the lights never go off. My skin feels thinner. My thoughts come slower. Sometimes I catch myself agreeing with them, thinking burial really does sound lonely. They say I'll be introduced upstairs soon, that Maybelline needs an aunt, that the family needs me. If anyone finds this, please listen carefully. If you ever pass through a place with no cemetery, if a family tells you they never bury their dead, run, because if you stay long enough, you won't be buried either.